play in the biodome below. The glass was thick and cold against her palm. She had been at the Galactic Institute for 3 months now, but the sight of alien creatures still made her heart race with excitement. The cubs were Thraken, one of the most feared predator species in known space. They looked like a mix between lions and dragons, with black scales that shimmered in the artificial sunlight. Their golden eyes could track movement from incredible distances. Even as youngsters, they were impressive and a little frightening. Professor Velshara walked past, her forearms carrying data tablets. She was the head of the Predator Studies program and had made it clear that she didn't think humans belonged here. Her species, the Veltharians, had been studying predators for centuries. What could humans possibly teach them? Jiwan tried not to take it personally. She was the first human in this program, and she knew she had to prove herself. But watching the cubs made her homesick. They reminded her of the dogs she had grown up with back on Earth, the way they moved and played together, except these cubs weren't playing. They sat in neat rows while their instructor, a massive adult Thraken named Hraxos, spoke to them in their growling language. The cubs looked bored. One of them, smaller than the others, kept glancing away toward the tall grass at the edge of the training area. The class ended, and the students were allowed into the biodome for supervised observation. Jiwan grabbed her notebook and headed down with the others. The air inside was warm and smelled like strange flowers. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth normal, making each step feel bouncy. Her roommate Hana had decided to skip today. Too scary, she had said that morning. Jiwan didn't blame her. Most humans found the predator cubs intimidating. But Jiwan had always been comfortable around animals, even the dangerous ones. The other cubs stayed with their group, but the small one wandered off. Jiwan watched him go, curious. He moved through the grass until he reached something round and blue, a training sphere that someone had forgotten. The cub sniffed it, then looked back at his group. None of the other cubs noticed him. The instructors were busy talking. The cub sat down next to the sphere, his tail curled around his feet. He looked lonely. Jiwan knew that feeling. Being far from home, surrounded by beings who didn't quite understand you. Before she could think about it, she walked over. The cub's head snapped up when she approached. His golden eyes locked onto her. For a moment, Jiwan wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The cub was still young, but his claws were sharp and his teeth were designed for tearing meat. Then she noticed his body language. His ears were forward, curious. His tail twitched slightly, not in aggression, but in interest. She had seen that look before on dogs meeting new people. Slowly, Jiwan bent down and picked up the training sphere. It was heavier than it looked, made of some dense alien material. The cub's eyes followed the sphere as she lifted it. Without really planning it, Jiwan threw the sphere. Not hard, just a gentle toss that made it arc through the air and land in the grass about 20 feet away. The cub exploded into motion. 1 second he was sitting, the next he was a blur of black scales and muscle. He caught the sphere in midair with his jaws, landed gracefully, and bounded back to her. He dropped the sphere at her feet and looked up at her, making a soft rumbling sound. Jiwan felt her heart swell. She picked up the sphere again and threw it, this time a little farther. The cub chased it with obvious joy, his whole body wiggling with excitement when he brought it back. They played fetch for 15 minutes. The cub started showing off, jumping higher, twisting in the air to catch the sphere at impossible angles. He was having fun. Real, genuine fun. Jiwan found herself laughing, forgetting about the other students who had stopped to watch. She didn't notice Professor Velshara standing nearby, her forearms crossed, watching with narrowed eyes. She didn't see Instructor Hraxos shake his massive head in disapproval. She only saw the happy cub bringing the sphere back again and again, his golden eyes bright with excitement. Finally, a bell chimed, signaling the end of observation time. The cub's ears drooped. He looked at the sphere, then at Jiwan, then back at his instructor who was calling the cubs to line up. Reluctantly, the cub turned and trotted back to his group. But every few steps he looked back at Jiwan. She waved at him, feeling silly but not caring. The cub's tail swished, almost like a dog wagging. As the students filed out of the biodome, Jiwon felt lighter than she had in weeks. It was just a game, just a few minutes of play. But it had felt important somehow, like she had made a connection across millions of years of evolution and thousands of light years of space. That evening, she told Hana about it over dinner in their small dorm room. The space station's cafeteria food was terrible, some kind of nutritional paste that supposedly met the dietary needs of 50 different species. It tasted like cardboard. Hana listened with wide eyes as Jiwon described the cub's acrobatic catches. Her friend was studying interstellar diplomacy, not xenobiology, but she loved hearing about Jiwon's experiences. It was just fetch, Jiwon said, laughing, like playing with a dog back home. Nothing special? Hana smiled but looked worried. You know, Professor Velshara doesn't like humans in her program. Be careful. Don't give her a reason to kick you out. Jiwon promised to be more careful. But as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't stop thinking about the cub. She wondered what his name was. She wondered if he remembered her. Most of all, she wondered if he had enjoyed playing as much as she had. The space station hummed around her, life support systems and artificial gravity generators working constantly. Through her small window, she could see stars scattered across the darkness. Earth was out there somewhere, too far away to see. She missed home. She missed her family and her dogs. She missed grass that was actually from Earth and air that didn't taste recycled. But she was here for a reason. She wanted to understand alien life, to build bridges between species, to prove that humans had something valuable to offer the galaxy. Tomorrow would be another day of classes, more lectures from professors who doubted her abilities, more whispers from alien students who thought humans were too soft for xenobiology. But tonight, she had played fetch with a predator cub and made him happy. That felt like enough. Jiwon woke up to her communication device buzzing urgently. She blinked at the ceiling, confused. It was barely morning according to station time. Next to her, Hana groaned and pulled a pillow over her head. The message was from her academic advisor. Emergency meeting. All human students in predator studies. Report to lecture hall immediately. Jiwon's stomach dropped. Had she done something wrong yesterday? She threw on her uniform and rushed out, leaving Hana half asleep in bed. The corridors of the space station were busy despite the early hour. Alien students from dozens of species hurried to their classes. A group of tall, blue-skinned Arxians nodded at her politely. A small furry Quellan scurried past late for something. When Jiwon reached the lecture hall, she found chaos. 12 Thraken cubs sat in a group outside the door. They weren't lined up properly like they should be for their morning lessons. They were just sitting there, waiting. Instructor Haraxo stood nearby, his massive form tense with frustration. Several other Thraken educators were trying to coax the cubs back to their training area. The cubs ignored them completely. Then one of the cubs spotted Jiwon. His ears perked up immediately. It was the cub from yesterday, the one she had played fetch with. He made a happy rumbling sound and trotted straight to her, sitting down at her feet like it was the most natural thing in the world. The other 11 cubs immediately followed. Within seconds, Jiwon was surrounded by a semicircle of young predators, all looking at her with bright, expectant eyes. One of them had brought a training sphere in his mouth. Jiwon felt her face go hot with embarrassment. Every alien in the corridor was staring at her. Instructor Hraxos's expression was thunderous. Professor Velshara appeared from inside the lecture hall. Her forearms crossed over her chest. "What have you done?" the professor demanded. Her voice was cold and sharp. "I just played with one of them yesterday," Jiwon said weakly. "Just fetch. Like a game." "A game?" Professor Velshara's eyes narrowed. "You treated a Thraken cub like a pet? Do you have any idea how inappropriate that is?" The cubs refused to budge. Instructor Hraxos tried commanding them in their language. They glanced at him but stayed put. One of them leaned against Jiwon's leg, purring like a giant scaly cat. An hour later, Jiwon sat in a conference room facing a panel of faculty members. Dean Terex, an elderly being whose species lived for centuries, sat at the center. Professor Velshara was there, along with Instructor Hraxos and several others. Jiwon had never felt so small. Instructor Hraxos spoke first, his deep voice filling the room. This human has disrupted centuries of tradition. The cubs have never behaved like this. She must have used some kind of manipulation technique. Some human trick. I didn't trick anyone, Jiwan protested. I just threw a ball. The cub chased it. That's all. Professor Velshara leaned forward. You do not understand the seriousness of this situation. These cubs are being trained for important roles in their society. They need discipline and structure, not games and frivolity. Your actions have undone weeks of careful instruction. Dean Terex held up one hand for silence. Let the human explain in her own words. What exactly did you do, student G1? G1 took a breath and tried to organize her thoughts. On Earth, we have animals called dogs. They're related to wolves, which are predators. Thousands of years ago, humans and wolves started living together. We played with them. We threw sticks and they brought them back. It was fun for both of us. That's how we became friends. The faculty members exchanged glances. Play? One of them asked, confused. Yes, Jiwan said. Play is important. It helps young creatures learn and bond. It makes them happy. I saw that cub yesterday and he looked lonely. So I played with him. That's all I did. Instructor Hraxos made a dismissive sound. Thraken cubs do not need to be happy. They need to be strong. They need to learn control and discipline. Happiness is irrelevant. Dean Terex stroked his chin thoughtfully. Outside the conference room, the cubs were still waiting. Someone had assigned Hana and the other human students to watch them. Through the window, Jiwan could see her friend nervously standing near the group of predators. Then something interesting happened. One of the cubs, a small female, approached Hana cautiously. She was clearly terrified, but the cub just looked at her with those big golden eyes. After a moment, Hana reached out and gently touched the cub's head. The cub leaned into the touch, making a happy rumbling sound. Hana looked shocked. Slowly, she picked up the training sphere that one of the cubs had dropped. She rolled it across the floor. 3 cubs immediately chased after it, tumbling over each other in their excitement to reach it first. Soon, more human students joined in. They started playing different games. Simple things like rolling balls, gentle tag, and hide-and-seek around the corridor pillars. The cubs were ecstatic. They ran and jumped and made happy sounds. They played with each other too, not just with the humans. Inside the conference room, the faculty members watched through the window. Even Professor Velshara seemed surprised. The cubs were showing more energy and joy than their instructors had seen in weeks of formal training. I have a proposal, Dean Terex said finally. We will conduct an experiment. For 1 week, we will allow human students to interact with the predator cubs. We will observe everything and measure the results. At the end of the week, we will compare the cubs' development to previous groups. This is foolish, Professor Velshara objected. You are risking the cubs' education on human sentimentality. Perhaps, the dean said calmly, or perhaps we will learn something new. Science requires open minds, does it not? After more debate, the faculty agreed to the trial. Jiwan was both relieved and nervous. She would get to spend more time with the cubs, but now the whole galaxy seemed to be watching. If this went wrong, it wouldn't just affect her. It would affect how every other species saw humans. As she left the conference room, the cub from yesterday trotted up to her immediately. His tail swished happily. She knelt down and scratched behind his ears, finding the spot that made him lean into her hand. What's your name? She asked softly, even though she knew he couldn't answer in words. The cub just rumbled and pressed his head against her hand. Later, Instructor Hraxos told her the cub's name was Koro. He said it with disapproval, clearly unhappy about humans getting so familiar with his students. But Jiwan didn't care. She had 1 week to prove that play and happiness mattered. 1 week to show that humans understood something important about connecting with other species. 1 week to change everything. The first day of the experiment began early. Jiwan and 5 other human students met the cubs in the biodome. Instructor Hraxos and several other faculty members watched from observation platforms, recording everything. The cubs recognized the humans immediately. Koro ran straight to Jiwan, nearly knocking her over with his enthusiasm. The other cubs surrounded the students, sniffing them curiously and making gentle rumbling sounds. Okay, Hana said nervously, looking at the 3 cubs around her. What do we do? Just be yourself, Jiwan said. Play with them. Let them show you what they like. It started simple. Fetch, chase, and gentle wrestling. The humans quickly learned that each cub had different preferences. Koro loved jumping and catching things in the air. A smaller cub named Rixa preferred stalking games, hiding in the tall grass and pouncing on rolling balls. Another cub, Thex, enjoyed puzzle toys that the humans made from building blocks. By the second day, something wonderful happened. The cubs started showing the humans their favorite places. Koro led Jiwon to a spot where the artificial sunlight reflected through crystal formations, creating rainbow patterns on the ground. Rixa showed Hana a nest of strange insects that glowed in the dark. The humans responded by sharing stories and pictures from Earth. They showed the cubs images of dogs, cats, and other animals. They taught them simple songs, humming melodies that the cubs tried to imitate with their rumbling voices. It was clumsy and silly, but it was communication. On the third day, Instructor Hraxos noticed something remarkable. The cubs were calmer during their structured lessons. They paid better attention to their Thraken teachers. They practiced their exercises with more focus. It was as if playing with the humans had given them an outlet for their energy, making them more ready to learn the serious stuff. Professor Velshara examined the medical data. The cubs' stress hormones had dropped significantly. Their sleep patterns were better. They were eating more healthily. Even their social bonds with each other had strengthened. They groomed each other more, shared food, and worked together during group exercises. On the fourth evening, Jiwon stayed late in the library, reviewing old records of predator species. Hana sat with her, munching on snacks from the cafeteria. Professor Velshara arrived unexpectedly and sat down at their table. The professor looked tired but curious. "Explain something to me," she said. "Why do humans do this? Why do you play with creatures that could harm you?" Jiwon thought about it carefully. On Earth, humans weren't the biggest or strongest creatures. We weren't the fastest either. But we were smart in a different way. We learned to understand other animals. We learned to read their body language and emotions. She pulled up images on her tablet. "See these wolves? They're predators, dangerous. But thousands of years ago, some wolves started hanging around human camps. They ate our leftovers. We threw them scraps. Over time, we started playing together. The friendliest wolves stayed close to us. Their puppies grew up around human children. Eventually, they became dogs." Professor Velshara studied the images. "So you domesticated them, made them dependent on you?" "Not exactly," Jiwon said. "It was more like partnership. Dogs helped us hunt. They warned us about danger. They kept us warm at night. We gave them food and shelter. Both species benefited, and play was how we bonded, how we learned to trust each other," Hana added. "Humans did this with lots of animals. Horses, cats, even birds. We're really good at making friends with other species. It's kind of our thing." The professor was quiet for a long moment. Most galactic species evolved differently. Predators stayed predators. Prey stayed prey. Species that were neither usually developed technology to protect themselves from both. We never needed to understand other species emotionally. We only needed to avoid them or control them. "But that means you missed something," Jiwon said gently. "Understanding emotions across species isn't weakness. It's strength. It's how humans survived when we were neither the strongest predators nor the fastest prey. We built bridges. We made allies." Professor Velshara stood up slowly. She looked at Jiwon with something that might have been respect. "Continue your work, student. I believe we have much to learn from your species." After she left, Hana let out a long breath. Did that just happen? Did Professor Velshara actually admit humans might know something she doesn't? Jiwon smiled. Maybe we're getting through to them. The next few days passed quickly. The cubs continued to thrive. They invented new games on their own, combining what they learned from humans with their own instincts. They started teaching each other tricks, sharing knowledge the way young creatures do when they're happy and confident. Koro became particularly adventurous. He figured out how to climb the crystal formations in the biodome, leaping from one to another with incredible grace. Other cubs watched and tried to copy him. Soon all 12 were playing an elaborate game of chase through the crystals, careful not to break anything. Instructor Hraxos watched this with mixed feelings. Part of him was disturbed by how different this was from traditional training. But another part, a part he had forgotten existed, remembered being a cub himself. He remembered playing with his siblings before the formal education system took over. Those had been good times. Happy times. On the 6th day, he approached Jiwon privately. She was sitting on the grass, letting Koro nap with his head in her lap. The cub was snoring softly, his scales warm in the artificial sunlight. "Teach me," Instructor Hraxos said simply. Jiwon looked up at him, surprised. Teach you what? How to play? I have forgotten. Perhaps I never truly knew. It was strange at first. This massive, scarred warrior trying to play like a cub. He was stiff and awkward, clearly uncomfortable. But G1 was patient. She started simple, just rolling a ball. Hraxos watched it roll past, unsure what to do. Go get it, G1 encouraged. It's okay to have fun. Slowly, hesitantly, Hraxos padded after the ball. He picked it up in his huge jaws and brought it back, looking embarrassed. G1 clapped her hands. Perfect. Now try catching it. She tossed the ball gently. Hraxos caught it in midair, his reflexes still sharp despite his age. Something shifted in his expression. His ears perked forward. His tail, which had been still, gave a small wag. They played for 20 minutes. By the end, Hraxos was breathing hard, but his eyes were bright. When was the last time I did this? He asked quietly. When was the last time I felt joy without purpose? Joy doesn't need purpose, G1 said. That's the whole point. Sometimes happiness is enough. The instructor looked at her for a long moment. We have been teaching cubs wrong for centuries. We shaped them into what we needed them to be, but we forgot to let them be children first. It's not too late to change, G1 said. On the 7th and final day of the experiment, Dean Terex called everyone together. He had compiled all the data. The results were clear and undeniable. The cubs who played with humans showed improvements in every measurable category. Better health, better emotional regulation, better social skills, and better performance in their traditional studies. But more than that, they showed something new. The cubs demonstrated empathy toward other species. They cooperated voluntarily instead of just following orders. They solved problems creatively instead of just using memorized techniques. They had become more than well-trained predators. They had become complete individuals. Professor Velshara stood before the faculty council. Her forearms were relaxed at her sides. I was wrong, she said clearly. I believed humans were too emotional, too sentimental to understand predator education. But they understand something we forgot. They know that strength without happiness is incomplete. That discipline without joy creates obedient machines, not thriving individuals. She looked at G1. I propose we integrate human methods into our curriculum. Not to replace our traditions, but to enhance them. Let us teach our cubs to be strong and disciplined, yes. But let us also teach them to play, to bond, to feel joy. Let us make them whole. The proposal passed unanimously. 3 weeks had passed since the experiment ended. The new play-based curriculum was working well. Human students and Thraken cubs spent time together every day, and the results continued to be positive. G1 had started to relax, thinking the hard part was over. She was wrong. It happened during an afternoon play session. A human student named Doyen was playing with a young male cub named Vrek. Doyen was enthusiastic but still learning. He grabbed Vrek a bit too roughly during a wrestling game, not understanding how strong the cub actually was. Vrek reacted on instinct. His claws extended and he swiped at Doyen, trying to push him away. The claws caught Doyen's arm, tearing through his sleeve and leaving 3 deep scratches across his skin. Doyen cried out and stumbled back. Blood dripped from his arm onto the grass. For a moment, everyone froze. Then Vrek realized what he had done. The cub's eyes went wide with horror. He backed away, his whole body trembling. He made a terrible keening sound, high and distressed. The other cubs immediately gathered around him, forming a protective circle. Instructor Hraxos arrived within seconds. He took one look at the scene and his expression darkened. This is exactly what I feared. Human methods are too casual, too reckless. Someone was bound to get hurt. The medical team rushed Doyen to the infirmary. The scratches were deep but not life-threatening. The station's advanced medical technology could heal them quickly. But the damage to the program might be permanent. An emergency meeting was called. Instructor Hraxos demanded the immediate termination of human interaction with the cubs. It is too dangerous, he insisted. We cannot risk the safety of either species. Professor Velshara was torn. She believed in the program but couldn't ignore the injury. We must consider the welfare of our students, she said quietly. Meanwhile, Vrek refused to eat or play. He curled up in a corner of the biodome, convinced he was a monster. The other cubs tried to comfort him, but he wouldn't respond. G1 watched through the observation window, her heart breaking. Can I see him? She asked Instructor Hraxos. Absolutely not. You humans have done enough damage. Then Doyen arrived. His arm was bandaged but healing well. He had insisted on leaving the infirmary early. When he heard what was happening, he went straight to the faculty. I want to see Rek, he said firmly. This was my fault, not his. I was too rough. I didn't respect his boundaries. He needs to know I'm not angry at him. You were injured, Instructor Hraxos said. The cub attacked you. He defended himself, Doyen corrected. I made a mistake. Back on Earth, dogs sometimes accidentally hurt people while playing. It doesn't mean the dog is bad. It means both of us need to learn better. Dean Tarix considered this. Let the human try. What harm can it do now? Jiwan and Doyen entered the biodome together. The other cubs moved aside, letting them approach Vrek. The young cub was still curled up tightly, his face hidden. Hey, Vrek, Doyen said softly. He sat down on the grass near the cub, not too close. Look at me, buddy. Vrek slowly lifted his head. His golden eyes were dull with misery. He looked at Doyen's bandaged arm and made a small sad sound. See this? Doyen held up his arm. It's already healing. The doctors fixed it up. It doesn't even hurt anymore. You didn't do anything wrong. I pushed too hard and you reacted. That's natural. That's normal. Jiwan pulled up images on her tablet. This is what happens sometimes when humans play with dogs on Earth, see? This person got scratched during a game, and this one got a small bite. But the dogs didn't mean to hurt anyone. And the people didn't blame the dogs. Everyone just learned to be more careful. Vrek inched closer, his eyes fixed on the images. Jiwan showed him pictures of dogs and humans playing together, happy despite past accidents. Making mistakes is how we learn, Doyen said. I learned that I need to be gentler. You learned that your claws are very sharp. Now we both know better. That's good. That's growth. Slowly, carefully, Vrek reached out one paw. He extended a single claw and touched the bandage on Doyen's arm, so gently that it barely made contact. His whole body was tense, ready to pull back if needed. Doyen smiled. It's okay. I know you didn't mean to hurt me. I'm not afraid of you. The cub made a rumbling sound, sad and apologetic. Doyen rumbled back, imitating the sound as best he could. It was clumsy but sincere. Vrek's ears perked up slightly. Doyen pulled out a soft ball from his pocket. Want to play? We'll take it slow this time. Nice and gentle, Vrek hesitated, then nodded. Doyen rolled the ball slowly across the grass. Vrek watched it roll, then looked back at Doyen as if asking permission. When Doyen nodded encouragingly, the cub pounced on it. They played for an hour. Vrek was noticeably more careful, controlling his strength and keeping his claws retracted. Doyen was more aware of the cub's signals, backing off when Vrek seemed overwhelmed. Both of them were learning, adapting, growing together. Over the next few days, Vrek and Doyen became inseparable. Their bond was stronger than any other human-cub pairing. The accident had created an opportunity for deep trust. They had faced a problem together and worked through it. Instructor Hraxos watched this transformation with amazement. In traditional Thraken education, a cub who injured someone would be punished and isolated to teach control through fear. But this human approach, turning mistakes into learning opportunities, seemed to work better. Vrek was more confident now, not less. He understood his own strength and how to moderate it. The other cubs noticed too. They became more aware of their own strength and more careful during play. But they didn't become fearful or timid. They became thoughtful and considerate. One evening, Instructor Hraxos approached Jiwan again. He looked troubled but determined. I need to confess something. When I was trained as a cub, I made a mistake similar to Rex. I accidentally hurt another student during an exercise. I was isolated for a month as punishment. I learned control, yes, but I also learned fear. Fear of my own nature, fear of connecting with others. He gestured toward Vrek, who was playing happily with Doyen. That cub learned something better. He learned that mistakes can be forgiven. That strength can be gentle. That connection is worth the risk of occasional accidents. Jiwan felt a wave of sympathy for the old instructor. It's never too late to learn new things. Even for adults, Hraxos nodded slowly. I am beginning to understand why humans are different. You accept imperfection, not just in others but in yourselves. You see failure as part of growth, not as something to be eliminated. Because perfection is impossible, Jiwan said. Every species makes mistakes. Every individual has flaws. The question isn't whether we mess up. It's what we do afterward. Do we punish and isolate, or do we forgive and teach? The instructor looked out at all the cubs playing with human students. The program had survived its crisis. In fact, it had become stronger. The incident with Rek had proved something important. Human-alien bonds could withstand difficulties. They could grow through challenges. The faculty met again to review the situation. This time, there was no talk of ending the program. Instead, they discussed safety protocols and training for both humans and cubs. They would continue, but with better preparation and understanding. Professor Velshara summarized it well. We cannot eliminate all risk from learning. Cubs will make mistakes. Humans will make mistakes. But mistakes are not failures. They are opportunities. This incident proved that our students, both human and Thraken, can handle difficulty with grace and wisdom. As Jiwan left the meeting, Koro trotted up to her. He had been waiting outside, worried about his friend Vrek. When he saw Vrek playing happily with Doyen through the window, his tail wagged with relief. Jiwan scratched behind his ears. Your friend is going to be okay. Everyone is going to be okay. Koro rumbled contentedly and pressed his massive head against her side. At that moment, Jiwan realized something important. They weren't just teaching cubs to play. They were teaching them something much more valuable. They were teaching them that mistakes could be forgiven, that trust could be rebuilt, and that true strength included kindness. And those were lessons that would last a lifetime. 6 months had passed since that first day when G1 threw a ball for a lonely cub. The Galactic Institute had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. News of the successful program spread quickly across the coalition. Other institutes sent representatives to observe. Worlds that had their own predator species requested human consultants. The small experiment had become a movement. Dean Terex called G1 to his office one morning. She arrived nervously, still not entirely comfortable with authority figures, but the dean smiled warmly and gestured for her to sit. We have received formal requests from 17 different worlds, he said. They want human expertise in interspecies bonding and play-based learning. The Coalition Council has created a new position, Xenological Ambassador for Cross-Species Understanding. They want you to be the first one. G1 felt dizzy. But I'm still a student. I just played with a cub because he looked sad. That's precisely why, the dean said. You saw an individual in need of connection and you responded naturally. No overthinking. No protocols. Just simple kindness. That is what the galaxy needs to learn. Of course, she wasn't alone. Hana was appointed as the academic director of a new field called Comparative Play Theory. She would study how different species engaged in playful learning and how those methods could be shared. Doyen and the other human students became instructors, teaching galactic species about emotional connection and forgiveness. The cubs themselves became ambassadors too. Koro, now slightly older and more confident, traveled with G1 to different worlds. He demonstrated what proper human-predator bonding looked like. Other species marveled at how a creature so powerful could be so gentle, how a predator could choose kindness without losing strength. Professor Velshara published a paper that shook the scientific community. In it, she admitted that galactic civilization had been making a fundamental error for thousands of years. They had focused on controlling predators instead of understanding them. They had emphasized discipline over emotional health. The results were functional but incomplete individuals. Human methods, she wrote, are not perfect, but they recognize a truth we forgot. All intelligent beings, regardless of their evolutionary path, need connection, joy, and the freedom to be themselves. Play is not frivolous. It is fundamental to healthy development. The paper won multiple awards and changed policy across the coalition. Educational systems began incorporating human insights, not just for predators but for all species. The benefits were universal. Instructor Haraxos underwent the biggest transformation of all. He completely redesigned the Thraken Cub program. It still included discipline and control, but now there was balance. Cubs played before lessons to burn energy. They had rest periods where they could just be young. They formed bonds with instructors who showed affection, not just authority. The new graduates from the program were remarkable. They had all the strength and skill of traditionally trained Thraken, but they also had emotional intelligence. They could work with other species easily. They could show mercy without seeing it as weakness. They were warriors, yes, but they were also friends, teachers, and healers. 6 months after the changes began, the Institute held a special ceremony. Jiwan was being awarded the Xenological Bridge Award, the highest honor given to individuals who advanced interspecies understanding. She stood on a stage in front of hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds. Her hands shook as she accepted the crystal trophy. It was beautiful. shaped like two hands from different species reaching toward each other. She looked out at the audience and saw so many faces she recognized. Professor Velshara, smiling with all four arms crossed proudly, Dean Terex nodding with approval, Instructor Hraxos, his scarred face showing an expression she never thought possible on a Thraken, gentle joy, and sitting in the front row, all 12 cubs from the original program. They were bigger now, no longer babies, but they sat together like a family, occasionally nuzzling each other or playfully batting at their neighbors. G1 gave her speech. She told the truth. She hadn't planned any of this. She didn't set out to change galactic education or win awards. She just saw a lonely kid and thought throwing a ball might make him smile. Everything else happened because simple kindness turned out to be more powerful than anyone expected. When one being reaches out to another, she said, amazing things can happen. It doesn't matter if we have 2 legs or 4. It doesn't matter if we have skin or scales or feathers. We all need connection. We all need to know that we matter. That's not a human thing or a Thraken thing. That's a universal thing. The audience applauded. But then something unexpected happened. Koro stood up from his seat and walked onto the stage. Security started to move, but Instructor Hraxos held up a hand to stop them. The young Thraken approached G1 and gently placed his massive paw over her hand. The gesture needed no translation. It said everything. Thank you, I remember. You changed my life. G1 felt tears rolling down her cheeks. She hugged Koro's huge head, not caring that everyone was watching. This was the moment that mattered. Not the award or the speeches. This connection between two beings who shouldn't have understood each other but did. That evening there was a celebration in the Biodome Gardens. The faculty had turned it into a party space with lights and music. But the best part was watching all the species mixing freely, playing games together, sharing food and stories. Professor Velshara found G1 standing alone watching the festivities. The professor held out the old training sphere from that first day. It had been preserved as a historical artifact. This belongs to you, she said, or perhaps to history, but I thought you might want to use it one more time. G1 took the sphere, feeling its familiar weight. She looked around and saw Koro watching her hopefully. His tail was already wagging. She threw it high into the air. Koro launched himself after it with the same joy as that first day, but this time he was joined by other cubs, by students from various species, by adults who had forgotten how to play until now. The sphere became a game of keep-away, everyone laughing and running through the gardens. Hana joined G1, linking arms with her best friend. Look what you started, she said with a smile. 1 ball, 1 lonely cub, and now the whole galaxy is learning to play. G1 shook her head. I didn't start anything. I just remembered something humans have always known. We're not the strongest or the smartest species, but we're really good at making friends, at seeing past the scary surface to the person underneath. That's our gift to the galaxy. The party continued late into the station's artificial night. When things finally wound down, G1 found Instructor Hraxos in a quiet corner of the biodome. He was watching a new group of young cubs sleep in a pile, their little bodies curled together for comfort and warmth. It's different now, he said quietly. Better, I watch these new cubs and I see what we lost in previous generations: spontaneity, trust, the ability to simply be happy without questioning whether happiness serves a purpose. He looked at G1 with respect. You humans have given us a gift. You reminded us that strength and gentleness can coexist. That power means nothing without connection. That discipline without joy creates soldiers, but play with purpose creates whole beings. G1 felt a swell of emotion. Years from now, when I'm old, this is what I'll remember. Not the award or the recognition. This moment right here. Knowing that things are better, that cubs will grow up happier, that different species understand each other a little bit more. Months later, back at the Institute, the changes had become normal life. New human students arrived every semester, eager to participate in the cross-species program. The biodome was always full of mixed groups playing and learning together. One day, a small human child visited the Institute. She was the daughter of a professor, barely 5 years old. She wandered into the training area where cubs were practicing with their instructors. The cubs immediately noticed her. These were new cubs, ones who had been raised with the reformed sea. That gentleness was strength. They surrounded the little girl, but not threateningly. They formed a protective circle, curious but careful. The smallest cub approached and sniffed her hand. The girl giggled and patted his snout. Instructor Hraxos watched from nearby, ready to intervene if needed. But no intervention came. The cubs played with the child, gently aware of her fragility. They brought her their toys. They let her climb on their backs for rides around the training field. They made her laugh with their silly antics. Hraxos felt something wet on his face and realized he was crying. In all his years as an instructor, he had never imagined such a scene. Powerful predator cubs, creatures designed by evolution to hunt and fight, playing tea party with a 5-year-old human. But it wasn't wrong. It was beautiful. It was proof that beings could grow beyond their base instincts, that culture and choice mattered as much as biology, that the future didn't have to repeat the past. Later that evening, Jiwon received a message from Earth. Her mother had sent pictures of the family dogs playing with her younger cousins. The images made her homesick, but also proud. For thousands of years, humans had been building these bridges, playing with wolves until they became dogs, befriending cats and horses and birds, learning to see past teeth and claws to the individ.